can't make it today. He's in transit, so he's asked me to kind of take his spot.
Oh, good.
So, here we are. Rock and roll. We'll never die.
Okay, who's got a good update first?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that you guys might have a pretty awesome update from what I hear.
We were thinking that too. Okay, well, Paul and I are here in Seattle. We're working on a music project with 25 musicians from many countries around the world, and the project is called Tiny Orchestral Moments. And this project has been happening every so often for the last few years. And many members of this project were part of the Guitarcraft community, and the Guitarcraft circle, the guitar circle, involves a lot of movement and passing melodies from one person to the next. So this is an amazing group to be using this 3D audio, spatial audio technology. So we got to record with the technology 2 days ago in Seattle. And Paul, maybe you can say something about it.
You recorded with the donut?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We did it.
Yeah, we had 20-something musicians all surrounding the spatial microphone, and one of my favorite moments was after we had just done our first test, and with all musicians all contributing, and Will, the engineer, coming into the room basically in tears because he was so excited from what was happening, and finally here's this group using this mic in this room, and it was a really emotional moment for everybody that was there.
Yeah, we recorded a lot of different styles of music. So, there's 25 people, and a lot of us are multi-instrumentalists. So we had a huge array of things going on, and we recorded at Sky Muse Studios, where Steve Turnage very graciously invited us to play there. And Sky Muse is owned by Ron Jones, who's a very famous film composer and just master musician and guy.
And great guy.
Great guy. Mainly that. But yeah, we were very moved by the experience, and it was really fun to use the movement between yourself and the microphone, and between yourself and the person next to you or the person across from you within the recording context. That's something I've never experienced before. And I really enjoy that the musicians now with this technology are able to make some decisions about how their music is recorded. Like I was just saying last night, if I record something, they can pan it this way or this way. But with this technology, when you're recording in this format, if you're over here, that's where you are, and that's it. And I really enjoy that.
Very much in the moment recording, knowing that what you're doing in that moment is how it's going to be on the recording. And then going into the control room after the recording and listening back and hearing that sound from that, it's astonishing.
Knowing who's who, you're like, oh, that's Beth over there, and
yes.
It's like we're going back in time and into the future at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's 1918.
Steve, would you like to say something? Because you were there the whole day.
Steve was there.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's unfolding. It's harvest time, basically. All these technologies and people that have worked for decades separately in agricultural timeframes got to the point where the fruit happened. And it changes. It's the helical nature of time when we just hit 1918 again, which is gathering around the gramophone horn with the louder people to the back and the softer people to the front, and making a mix by being in a room. And there's no post-production. What you play is what you get. And so this is sort of, it's transformative.
Well, when I think about some of the important single mic recordings of the past that have meant something to me, like Miles Davis' "Kind of Blue," apparently was a single mic recording. Another one which was done by my friend Peter Moore, Cowboy Junkie, that was recorded with one single Calrac microphone. that was a recording of a moment in time. But it seems like from what you guys are saying, we're now actually able to capture a moment in time and space.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Yeah, we're recording the entire room. And it's important to note, on some of the stuff we were working on, we had a bunch of acoustic instruments, a few electric instruments, me on violin, drummer, and it is tricky to learn how to think in terms of what that microphone's person would be hearing, because that's who you're playing for in the room. You're trying to get a perfect mix for that one person.
And give it personal space.
Right,
Well.
but like also, obviously, I'm sure, if you guys don't know, you can record with regular technology and then have it mixed into 3D as well. So it doesn't have to be this 1918 recording technique. Like if that doesn't work for a band, they can do it in a more traditional way and then have it transformed into 3D. But this experience is pretty astounding.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, well, I could imagine it being pretty exciting exploring the kind of psychedelic things that were first experimented with quad in the 60s with like, Pink Floyd. And then, it's funny, like I found that with surround, when surround kind of first happened, I really got interested in, there's a few kind of mix engineers that started building their name up for mixing in surround. I can actually remember the name of this one guy who I guess kind of got a monopoly on that almost, and he mixed a bunch of stuff in surround. I can't remember his name now.
Well, Bob Clearmountain did with Roxy Music Avalon. He offered his services at no charge so he could figure it out. And if you hear the surround version of that, every song is different. And sometimes, you got the brass blowing out of the back speakers and startling you. And so there were a lot of sort of missteps. The difference here as compared to surround is that you really couldn't replicate this with spot microphone and put it in there because it's recording the air in the room and reproducing the air in the room. And as soon as you're done with the performance, you're also done with the mixing. And that's an interesting collapse of time.
I also really enjoyed the fact that the altitude, shall we say, the altitude is also something that you can record. So at one point during the recording, one of the guitarists started to sit down, and I ended up laying on the floor, and everybody was on the floor.
That's awesome.
We recorded, I don't know what we were recording with that, but we recorded some classic things and some super experimental things and one of Paul's beautiful pieces, and just a really wide range of stuff with a very wide combination of small and big groups, and I think it's going to change the world. I said it.
Yeah.
I said it.
I agree.
Cool.
Yeah.
How are you?
So, hey, can I ask a technical question? So when everything is recorded, like you said, in the single mic, and you get the 3D spatial, then is there any way digitally you can strip the spheres or the dimensions apart?
No.
Nope.
That's
Okay,
it.
so it's a single stream of data.
You can add 3D dimension to a 2D recording through the immersion mixing.
Okay.
You cannot do the other way around, right? I don't think
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, I've always been like really interested in spatial recording, but where I could actually move, right? I think of like, a Paganini, a violin solo. And
Sure.
I always thought it would be really cool. I kind of diagrammed some stuff out years ago where you could actually have that violin sounding in full 3D space and manipulate it.
Well, they've pioneered a way to mix where there's like there's a map on a computer, and there are different colored dots for different instruments, and you can move them for the different throughout the track. You can say for the first verse you're up here, and then you're going to slowly move, and they can do this spread out. It's funny that you say that because I was talking to Paul Hubert from
That company. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I spilled the beans on that, but he actually told me that he had come up with the idea to create this technology because he heard a Stradivarius violin in his studio, and he didn't feel like he had the correct equipment to capture the sound of the violin. So it was amazing to me that of all of the instruments, violin was one of them that inspired him to do this. And then you say that Paganini again, which is just
because Nora, in case people don't know, what is
I have a technical question really quickly.
case people don't.
Sorry, Steve, go
Nora,
ahead.
what do you play?
Oh, I play violin. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, you do? Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
So,
yeah. One of the many things I do is I play violin. Yeah.
so it's really cool. If you've ever seen some of John Cage's scores.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so they're more like architectural blueprints, right?
They
And
are,
because I think, in his mind, he was, he was really thinking about all these things and, not
Well,
just
the Manhattan skyline, wasn't that one of his works?
Ah,
Great
yeah, right.
Manhattan skyline.
yeah,
And Trimpin as well.
yeah, and I actually saw these at an exhibit at the New York Museum of Modern Art. They had I was probably about 12 years old, and I was like, it just like totally affected me, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
Jonathan, what were you going to say? We cut you off. Is Jonathan wanting to say something? Maybe? Maybe not. Okay, who else has got something?
Oh, you know what? Was I supposed to say that thing that Peter always says where like we're all being recorded, blah, blah, blah?
Well, now
Like,
you did, so we're all
okay. Anyway, we're all being recorded, blah, blah, blah.
Where is Peter today?
Apparently he's in transit. He couldn't make it to the call today.
Out to the country for.
Jonathan, you've got a really bad connection.
Mm-hmm.
He did ask a question in here
Yeah.
in the chat. There are two ways. One is a microphone that picks up the air, and the other one is to mix things. You can mix things from, Paul had the experience of mixing from WAV files.
Yeah.
Yes, so you can do from stem files, and I heard some demos that were made using both the spatial microphone and stem files.
Oh.
You can combine those two, and so in that way you can decide where to move things around afterward if you have up close miking that you mix in later afterward.
Oh, of course, that would be great. Yeah, because you have like
there are very few limitations with this technology, and I'm not an expert at any of this stuff. I just do the music and some other things, but every time I hear somebody ask a question, but don't you need this? And the answer is always no, you can do it anyway. And it seems like they've really got a handle on how to integrate this with a lot of different approaches and types of equipment. And, you don't need any special headphones, for example, and all that stuff makes it very adoptable.
It's a new science of recording, actually. For instance, if you have the air being recorded and something else is in the room that you're close miking, you need to place it at the same perspective as it was from the microphone. So you place it in the right place. That part doesn't move if you're going to close mic, but you can add in other stems, other pieces of music that are independent. So if it's part of the live and you're reinforcing a given thing, then you have to basically honor geometry.
That is so cool. I mean, I one thing that I love about sometimes, capturing a good stereo microphone, for example, like a drum sound, and you've got a nice stereo picture of the sound with just one mic or a couple mics that are placed in stereo. And then the joy of mixing all your spot mics to match that and you find all of a sudden it kind of all sits in place and it just can sound really magical. You have to be careful about phase though. So that's one thing that really excites me is the idea of basically using this new special mic as basically the room mic that becomes the guide for all your spot mics.
100%. I have a question. So I imagine that when this becomes available in the market, it'll be something that just kind of fits in a briefcase and is easy to travel with. Would that be correct? Because it's just the donut and an interface.
Yeah, and I think I could go into what they want to do with the headphones, but I don't think I'm allowed to here.
That's fine. Yeah, I don't need to. I just wanted them.
Elegant, though. That's what we can say.
Well, we're at the beginning of a long century of creation, And it's similar to many other technological shifts. Like, for instance, when CDs came out, there was first like 5 and then like 20. And you go back to a tower and say, hey, what came in? Oh, good, Falco's here. You know, I'll take that. And there's ABC and there's Human League Dare. Yay, that's out. And you keep on finding these things. So before Wednesday, there were probably 3 tracks that could be released. On Wednesday, 25 more tracks were generated. And there were people who now are the most expert in the world in this method of recording because it had never been done before. And it's pretty interesting to so it's again agricultural time frames. It's like the harvest happened and the fruit fell and the seeds are now planted again. And now we're in the 2nd generation, and it's still, now we go back to the seed in the ground. And
yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jonathan asked another question. Can the back catalog be re-encoded? That's a yes. Would there be benefits in perhaps solely file size, but inability to encode the spatial element in absence of the stems?
Well, in absence of the stems, but there's all of that is evolutionary, and typically the answer to any question that you have, as Nora says, is yes. It's just a matter of yes, you can get fruit, but the tree has to be grown first. You can't get fruit off of a sprout.
Message to all the producers out there: make sure you record at the highest sample rate possible, and make sure you mix stems if you don't do this already. And a lot of people are doing it and have been doing stems for a good while now. There is,
you should define stems for the crowd. And actually,
yeah, I mean, like there's stems of stuff out there in the kind of dark web. You can download stems of Bohemian Rhapsody.
When you say stems, you mean separate tracks, right?
Yes, separate elemental tracks. They don't have to be the actual complete multi-tracks, but the basic elements of the music. So the drums all mixed in a stereo mix, the bass all in a stereo mix. They all have to be stereo, and well, generally. And so usually it's about maybe 8 to 10 elements that make up the song, and the stems are actual bounces of your final mix. So if you've made any moves on any of those things, those moves are attached, embedded in that wave file. So the theory is with stems is that you can throw up your faders to 0, and your mix comes back out at the output level that you want it to be out at. So that's the theory. Am I correct, Steve?
Well, it also lets you make instrumental mixes, for instance. So if your vocals are on one and you need to have a backing for a commercial or something, some sort of a licensed music situation, it makes it easy to manipulate things. But even that stuff is still flat land. The whole stereo idea is still flat, and we've exposed a new dimension. And so, and everyone is innocent to new dimensions because no one's an expert. That's sort of the beauty of it, is that there are no books. And the progress that was made on Wednesday at Sky Muse is, and again, this is Ron Jones' studio. Ron Jones is the composer for Family Guy and Star Trek Next Generation, and he has over 40,000 registered works. And he was in LA for 37 years and came up to Stanwood, which is a little town 50 miles north of Seattle, and bought a 22-acre compound that had a racetrack and a baseball field on it. And he converted the garage into a world-class studio. And this is where this experience happened. And I think that history will look kindly upon it, considering some of the things I heard there. There's like a trio called Zoom and all these people are very, very international. And this trio was in a guitar triangle instead of a guitar circle. And they played Blackbird by the Beatles. And it was just, it really did hit the emotional center so hard. And then Nora joined in, and Beth is a master whistler and started tweeting, not the way that some tweet, but literally with her lips. And it sounded like a songbird, and the songbird was following through the melody. And it was over in sort of a corner, and we place people back again in this method. If the guitar amp is too soft, you don't move a mic to it, you move it closer to the mic. It's just a complete inversion of recording techniques. Modern recording techniques now has a postmodern recording techniques requirement.
That's awesome.
And it is.
That was a great moment, definitely, for all of us. And it was amazing that we were so far away from each other, but it like really makes you listen in a different way, you know, because you're recording with somebody who's 20 feet away from you and their part is so quiet, but you know, if you can get it right, the person in the microphone is getting like the most amazing, perfect.
It's the head. It's where when you have the headphones on, when you have even the earbuds in, that's a thing. That's where your head is.
And it gets back to the single mic concept. There's a school of thought amongst engineering that to really kind of get the best sound of something happening in the room, you err on the side of the least amount of microphones, ideally one, because then you're not dealing with phase issues. So if you have one microphone that's set up well, that can capture what's going on in that room, that's why Kinda Blue sounds so friggin' amazing.
Yeah.
Or that Cowboy Junkies album, if you've heard it, the Cowboy Junkies. What's the album called again? Somebody help me. Cowboy Junkies. Do you guys know that record?
The Trinity Sessions.
Trinity Sessions. Thanks, Rich. Yes. So that record was recorded in a church in Toronto by my friend Peter Moore with this Calrac mic, which is kind of like the closest thing I've heard to how this mic works, although as Steve explains to me, it's not even close, but apparently. So the Calrac mic is like, I think it's like 4 capsules that are all set up in a stack within a microphone, and there's a decoder box that decodes it so that you can kind of basically mix this one mic. And so it's kind of the closest thing to like the one microphone that's a bunch of microphones. If you haven't heard that album, I just can't wait to hear that album mixed in spatial audio.
Yeah, so I calculated, you had about 25 people in the studio the other day, and I calculated what person by person, thinking about how long they've been playing music for. And we had a collective 1,000 years of musical experience in the room. And we're trying to leverage this 1,000 years of experience to get this one good take of Blackbird, you know? And it was just very poetic, the whole thing. Oh, and sometimes when we would drop the ball, because sometimes it happens, Steve would say, "This is the 1,000 years. This is what we get for all that work."
Not me, Steve.
No, the other Steve. And it was very funny because, you know, we're always all starting over all the time. So
if I could shift the conversation for a second, if I may, please let me know if you don't want to, because this is awesome. But I was just kind of like, you know how they say you should always be prepared for failure?
Yeah.
And that's really good advice. I think it's also really good advice to always be prepared for success. And sometimes I think about this technology and the wonders of what ArtChain is building, and Resonate and all the people involved in this community. And I start to think about what happens if everything is wildly successful. And one of the things that come into my mind is that it will be very, very important to build a really strong, solid community that has a really good, solid base and a solid understanding of who we are and where we're going. And so these are some of my concerns, is kind of like being prepared for success.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, I thought I'd just kind of maybe throw that out into the air and see what comes back.
Anybody have thoughts on success? I definitely felt that feeling in the studio, kind of rushing towards me like, oh, this is a totally new territory. This is history that's happening. And it was very, very intense and inspiring.
So I have a question here.
Yeah.
We're a community of we're audiophiles, we're musicians, we're producers, we're engineers, we're people that care deeply, emotionally, viscerally about the quality of music. And there's this huge population of people that have become inured to absolutely corrupted MP3 crap.
Mm-hmm.
So have we done any market research as to whether people really care?
I think they do care because, and maybe other people who know more about this can say more, but I think that even if you're not an audiophile, and I'm not, I mean, I'm a musician and I care about the quality of the music that I'm doing, but I'm not an audiophile person. I do feel a different emotional connection when I can hear in my head, around my head, above my head, beneath my feet, something over here, someone over here, especially if I know who those people are. Like you're listening to an artist who you love and you're like, oh, this voice is right here. This voice is right here. And it makes a huge emotional impact that I think any human being can realize. What do you think?
Yes.
Right. And I totally appreciate that, having been an orchestral string player myself, a band leader, a producer, a person who in all of my production really tried to create spatialization insofar as I could with then existing technologies. But I do wonder whether we as musicians might be more starry-eyed about the appeal of this to a population that just thinks of music as background.
Well, I have a story about that, Jonathan. I tend to agree with your concerns. I think a big part of this will also involve a bit of education, and because my child, she listens to music on her laptop, and then she listens to music on her little iPod from like about 10 years ago. And when I put things through my speakers in the studio with my subwoofer on, she actually doesn't like it. She wants to hear it back the way she is used to hearing it on her little tiny speakers. She literally doesn't like the sound of the subwoofer and the bass. And
I've
it's
had that
really weird to me.
experience before with a little cassette deck at my job in 1983 doing electronics. And here, getting used to a certain, actually Modern Man, Concrete Scheme by Modern Man, which is a Ultravox spin-off pretty much. And I got so used to the 3-inch speaker that when I finally heard the record for real, it's like, oh, that's nothing like what I fell in love with. But I think we've got a different issue, which is sort of like black and white to color. Is that it's a very different experience. Go ahead, Derek.
Oh, sorry, Steve. Hey, guys. I don't know all of you. I'm new at our chain. I'm longtime associate with Fabian, so that's how I'm in. But I'm the director of content over there. In my other world, I've been working for Equinox Fitness for 14 years as an instructor. But I also created a neuroscience and music training program for instructors nationally. So I spent a few years doing that. And I also consult on sound for them. And Equinox, if you don't know, it also owns SoulCycle, which despite all of the bullshit involved with the actual format, they spend $80,000 a room on sound. Whereas in the Equinox locations, they spend less than half of that to save money. And I'm bringing this up because going back to Jonathan's question about what will get people, I really think exposure is the most necessary thing, because people who go to both Equinox and SoulCycle know that the sound is so much more immersive in a SoulCycle room because the subwoofers are put into the floor or on the floor. Whereas in Equinox, for aesthetic purposes, they always put the speakers up in the ceiling, including the bass signals. And so people hate taking spin classes at Equinox, whereas at SoulCycle, it's an experience and a community experience. So I always see that as translating to addressing your question, getting people in front of the technology, I think, although Daryl's daughter might not agree in the same way, but besides that, it's the exposure aspect that's going to make people like, oh, this is possible.
Well, and I think people's minds will change when they stop comparing hearing a track in one way to a track in another way. When they just start hearing the first version of the track in this new format, I think that'll make a big difference. And honestly, like in the film industry, they're constantly making, new developments and things. And I don't know if they sit around saying, well, are people going to like it if it's better? Like I think they usually, I don't know, but it seems that they just keep developing and they say, well, we're going to put it out. It's going to be better, and we're going to see what happens. They're not going to waste time trying to convince something before something happens. I think it has to be released, and then you have to see what the reaction is.
And here's another aspect, is that it collapses back into sounding like your regular life sounds. In like 1992 or 3, I went to the HIT Lab, Human Interface Technology Laboratory at University of Washington, and was demoed the very first virtual retinal displays, where they would paint with laser on your retina so you can see stuff. And they had like a picture of the Space Needle. And I was very underwhelmed because it just looked like seeing the Space Needle. And I've seen the Space Needle many, many times. And that's one of the aspects of just the normalcy of it, like surround sound, for instance. In the guitar circle, there's like 12 guitars around you and you're sitting in the middle, and that's truly surround sound. And so when you're going into like the 5.1 system, it's sort of artificial as compared to, so we hear in surround all the time. We're continually available to the spatial world. It's what we naturally hear. And so this is where the shift is. What I've heard people say when they've heard this, well, there's nothing special about that, because there isn't. It's back to actually the air in the room being replicated into your ears. It's back down to, we don't have to do production tricks to make it sound real, because it becomes real. So whatever you can do, for instance, could you imagine a book on tape where people are having a conversation in the room as if you're in the room? This is one of the things on Wednesday that was so amazing, sitting in the control room where there were 5 speakers, and there's a couch behind, just like that, and people were talking on the couch, and it was being transmitted what was in the studio. And when people were talking around the microphone and people were talking on the couch, I couldn't tell the difference. I didn't know if the people behind me were actually the people behind me or the people that were in the other room. And that was mind-blowing. It's a completely different context.
Yeah, definitely.
I was going to add that it's the headphone experience is very impressive.
Yeah.
And that seems relatively easy to distribute. So as soon as people start to experience the spatiality over the headphones, I think they're going to be blown away.
Well, and it brings you so much closer to the thing that you're listening to. Like there was a sample in the studio. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what the sample was, but anyway, there's a sample of an extremely well-known jazz recording with a singer who is one of my favorite of all time. And when you put the headphones on, you feel like that person is right in front of you, because you can turn your head and they're still there. They're not going anywhere. And you really feel like you're hearing it in a new way. And, I'm not an audiophile person, and I loved it. So there you go.
I was also going to say that I think in terms of wild success, when Daryl was saying, what do we, how do we deal with success? I think it's really crucial as soon as possible. I almost feel ashamed for not bringing other friends to the conversation this week, but we need the story to be a whole world story, very diverse, all styles, all genres, all peoples.
Yeah, that's what we tried to do with Tiny Orchestral Moments. Yeah,
that's great. And the more that becomes the identity of this project, the better for all of us.
Yeah, well, I think it's just really fascinating to explore the idea that we're talking about at least 2 co-ops here. And the structure of a co-op, the whole kind of concept of a co-op, I think leans really well. Greg has brought this up before too. It leans really well to the structure of a blockchain project, in particular, how Archain has unfolded. And I guess what's important to me, I used to work at a co-op back in the 90s. Mountain Equipment Co-op in Canada. And they had like a good decade to kind of really build a solid base of outdoor sports enthusiasts who really cared about the environment. And so this base that kind of was formed naturally over 10 years helped guide the direction of the co-op, and helped it gain the success in the way that it should have been built. And I guess this is the concern I have now, is that we don't have 10 years. And I'm just hoping that we can kind of structure things rapidly yet effectively to kind of build a solid base of members at the beginning here who have the kind of wisdom and guidance to kind of make sure that the group grows, in the way perhaps it should, if I can use that word.
Help shape the future.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess one area of guidance that I've always really held dear to me ever since I first read it was in Lawrence Lessig's book, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace. He talks about 4 ways to control individual behavior in a society: architecture, law, market, and norms. And I think, a couple of things we can work on, and we are working on right now. Obviously, one is architecture. And if you think about the definition of architecture being the flow of people through a structure, which is one kind of way to define architecture. I think that, if we build the architecture in such a way, which is what we're doing, in such a way where the flow of people will naturally lean towards the truth,
yeah,
then we're on good solid ground. But the other 3 we have to really kind of work on. Of course, laws are something we have to work with and maybe help influence. And then market, how it kind of gets people hear about it. But norms to me are like, well, as Lawrence says in this book, they're the hardest ones to change. And so I think that's something too that we could kind of discuss and kind of, talk about, how the norms help guide and help create the architecture, or vice versa, and how it all kind of interacts together.
Fascinating.
I want to recommend a book that really has crystallized a lot of things for me about building community and doing work in society. And that's a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, a classic that puts the nature of dialogue at the core for establishing social truth. And anyway, if I start there, a friend recommended that I start there, and I'm really glad finally in my life that happened. So that's one answer to the question.
And the name of the book again?
Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Can you type it into chat, please?
I will, certainly, by Paulo Freire. It's a classic.
Well, does anybody else have any updates leading up to Berlin? Because that's happening soon. It will be very exciting. I'm going to be there. I'm sure a lot of you are going to be there. Anybody have anything about that?
I'll just say that I'm really looking forward to meeting every single one of you when we're out there.
Let's have a group hug first thing.
Yeah, damn right.
Really looking forward to that.
I want to throw in that my wife found out that this weekend is the Berlin Coffee Festival, and it extends through Monday. So on Monday at 11 a.m., and it's not far from the hotel, it's free, and there'll be coffee roasters from around the planet offering free samples. So that's where I'm going to be Monday morning before I have to go over to the conference.
Does Rudy Harper know about this?
Yeah, where's Rudy when you need him?
There's Rudy, and you won't believe who's sponsoring it.
La Marzocca is the sponsor, is the title sponsor. So
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep, Rudy knows.
That's amazing.
I just want to make a very interesting, I think, historical point about coffee and coffee houses, which is that back in the 1600s and 1700s, when the Royal Society and other institutions that became involved developed, coffee houses were in London and in Amsterdam and I believe in Paris, the central locations for the propagation of information about the Renaissance and scientific, or the basically incorporating science and true knowledge into societal activity. So at times I go, oh, coffee, but frankly, coffee houses have been incredibly important culturally, historically. And that was actually part of my undergraduate thesis on the application of evolutionary models to cultural dynamics, looking at coffee houses. So I just wanted to state that.
Wow.
Coffee and music, man, that's civilization right there.
Yeah, my friend John Buckman, who had the music distribution system called Magnatune, has for the last 3 years been designing a Android-powered espresso machine that's a decent espresso, and they are shipping. It's very amazing because it has total control over temperature, flow rate, and pressure over time, and it's making an incredible community around it too, because all of the people that have bought one are part of a Basecamp conversation, and that's a way to build community around an affinity, and it's working really well, but it takes a long time and a lot of work. He first had the Decent Advisors, who are the high-end baristas around the world, and they each got a machine when it was the first prototype. And then opening it up for sale, those Decent Baristas are now providing support to the different people that are getting the machines now, because it's sort of a technical thing. And it turns out that it's sort of like what we did on Wednesday, is that taking a lot of the variables out pushes the variables around such that puck preparation in espresso becomes everything. Because the other parts are held. So it pushes where the important things are. It takes away a lot of the gray areas and gets back, and hopefully in our case, that pushes towards an emotional connection as compared to a technological connection, where when you're mixing and doing all this audio engineering, you by necessity have gone away from the actual emotions of the playing itself, and now we're going to collapse that down to a direct heart-to-heart connection with very little in between. And this is part of the present, because we really can't talk about the future anymore, because things are changing so fast and everything is happening in parallel, and choice outstrips time. So it used to be that you plan something and that you do something for a long, then you release it. But now it's sort of like in blockchain, where whatever the lead block is the truth in a way. And so all the things that you might need, find out who's the best in the world at it, and defer to them. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the higher order structure generates from what we are doing now. So the value of following one's heart's desire and one's passion, one's calling. So there's three forms of employment. There's a job. Congratulations if you have one. There's a career. So much the better. But the highest level is having a calling. And so if people can follow their calling, and others who need that skill set are able to implement, follow them in their calling, then we all get a chance to move everything forward in parallel, because that's the new way. And that's sort of what the definition of a cooperative is. You find who is good at what they love to do and let them do it, and see what needs doing and do it, but don't offer help necessarily, because like for instance, if you're in a busy engineering studio and you are doing everything, the guy on the back or girl on the couch that says, hey, can I help, is a distraction from, you're in the midst of basically being fully on mind space, completely there. And if someone comes up and says, can I help? It's not helpful. So, but if they're if you're asked for help, by all means, please assist. But those are some general concepts of what the present is becoming and what we become within the present. So,
I have one thing to say to that, Steve. Amen.
Or a woman in these modern sensitive times.
It's all right, Daryl. It's okay.
Sorry.
Greg, you're here? How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah, it's
It was amazing to be with you yesterday in the studio.
We had a great day.
Greg brought in
yesterday.
Greg brought in the most amazing tropical piece.
So we were in the studio all day yesterday, and we have been for the past 4 days, and all the musicians were tired, and it was really it was kind of at a low point. Greg comes in with this melody inspired by African music that he started playing, and everybody, the whole room came to life, and everybody gathered around him and figured out their parts. And within 20 to 30 minutes, we had a piece based on this idea from the African music inspired idea that just brought everybody to life.
Yep, it was amazing. It's called Robert Fripp Goes Surfing. And Greg, we're so happy that you're
I love that piece.
That came out with the title, I'll admit it. Okay, sorry.
And that's another definition of community and cooperative, because someone had a good idea, and Greg seems to have a few good ideas, evidently, according to the world, and get support from those who are skilled and willing to move in an appropriate direction. And the person that's come up with the melody gets a chance to communicate the melody. And this is what governance and leadership is in a community, is let the person with the melody explain it. If you choose to support, go for it, or get a complementary melody, or say a harmony. You know, these universal truths that are within music apply, because they're universal truths by definition. They apply to all things. It's just a matter of how well to map things. And the basic universal truth is chill out, usually.
Well, I wanted to say it was incredibly energizing to walk into the studio with and be greeted with, you know, some new faces and some faces of people I've been working with for nearly 20 years, and the energy in the room was spectacular. And I think in part because people have been working so hard and in such a concentrated way. It was phenomenal. I felt at home. I felt like I was welcomed home.
You
and
got
the other thing,
a video of it too, so we'll have that. And there's a little video of you in the studio on my Facebook wall, but there's going to be a full video of us when we recorded it too. So.
Oh, that's awesome. But the other thing I wanted to say was that actually it was the whole group that came up with the arrangement, and it was Nora who was the conductor and director.
Yeah.
It was, and this is, I mean, to your point, Steve, about the cooperative nature. It was really quite leaderless. You know, I walked in with a little bit of genetic material, and then other people contributed their genetic material, and then this form, this being emerged out of all the energy and experience and love that was in the room. And that's I was just grateful to be a part of it. It was really a lot of fun.
Well, your piece was one of the highlights of the week, and we've rehearsed probably about 50 pieces or more, with all the improvisations, maybe approaching 100. And sorry, Paul, I'm nominating Greg for number one.
I agree. I'm supportive.
Well, I really enjoyed Administrivia. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Up on that banana phone. Okay.
You should describe that piece.
I think we have a video of that too. Anyway,
Okay.
sorry, everybody. It's all leaking out everywhere. Sorry.
That's awesome.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
When Robert Fripp surfs, is he sitting down on a chair?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, Paul would know. Yeah.
Yeah. He needs a special surfboard with the chair.
Awesome. Well, it's been quite a week because we've been over in Archain Land because we've been working really hard to get testnet demos up and ready and polished, and we're working really hard on the R song demo and making sure that we have all the stakeholders in line on the messaging for that. And at the same time, we're conducting our validator sale, which means I've been up at all hours working with people all around the world, and most recently in China, because people are staking the network now. And I've been having a lot of calls with various groups all throughout China who are doing their part. I'm just astonished. There are these very large communities within China that are very supportive of our chain, and then they are all committing to standing up nodes. So that means both hardware and software, and committing to making sure that those nodes are operational for the next year or so. And this is kind of it's it's really astonishing to me, honestly, that there's this kind of will that's being galvanized all around the globe to lend support to this effort. I mean, there are all these people everywhere who are willing to commit precious compute resources and their precious time to make this network come to life. And talk about cooperation. This is cooperation on a grand global scale, and it's very humbling, and it's very encouraging to see so many people who are committed. I mean, really committed to making this thing real.
So I've often thought of Archain as the skeleton of the global consciousness, but it looks like you're actually generating a nervous system as well that's starting to evolve on top of it.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And all we need to do is generate organs and cosmetics, and then it's kissable.
And actually, Nathaniel Hawthorne, in I think the Scarlet Letter, wrote this incredible passage that I wish I had memorized, where he described that in the future he envisioned a world with a giant electrical network connecting everybody. And I actually quoted that passage in my second book on how to use the internet in 1992, and I need to find the passage because it is so appropriate for our building internet N.0.
Yes.
N.0, not spelling no, by the way. That's not. That doesn't spell no.
Maybe NOH, like the Japanese theater style, but
that's
no.
actually pretty cool.
It looks like we have 5 minutes. Anything?
Do we? Was Peter unable to make it today?
He's in transit. He was listening. Actually, he is listening in right now. So, and he gave the baton to Daryl. And Daryl's fabulous.
Yeah, he's here right now, and he's been chiming in the chat. I guess I should have been reading what he was saying, because he's saying some great stuff out in the chat. But yeah, he's here. He just doesn't have the kind of connection capability to communicate right now.
Understood. Yeah. Well, I have to hop over to a noisy train station. Peter says he's in a noisy train station.
Wow.
Yeah. I guess he doesn't have to go very far to go to Archons.
Maybe you guys will enjoy I don't know, but as a little smile from Seattle, this view.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's where we are, trying to make some beauty in the world here.
And you can breathe the air today for a change for Seattle recently.
The air. Let's not take the air for granted, folks.
Oh no.
It's
No.
all Canada's fault. We're sorry. We're truly actually sorry this time. When we say sorry, we're sorry.
That's it. Funny. Okay, I have to jump over to a staff meeting, but it was really, really great to see you guys again, and I am so looking forward to seeing you all in Berlin. This is gonna be a sea change moment. So.
All right, bye guys.
I'm going to fly too. See ya.
See you all there.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Love you all.
See you soon.